the Los Angeles Times. I'm Mark Olsen, and welcome to another of our virtual indie-focused screening events. Today, we're very excited to have with us from the film The Card Counter, writer and director Paul Schrader and actor Tiffany Haddish. In the film, Oscar Isaac plays William Tell, a small-stakes gambler who becomes entwined with Melinda, played by Tiffany Haddish, a manager who's encouraging him to play for higher stakes at the same time that William meets Kirk, played by Ty Sheridan, a restless young man whose father had served with William when they were both guards at Abu Ghraib prison. And so to talk about this story of guilt and redemption, please welcome our guests, Paul and Tiffany. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi.
Hey, Tiffany. I just came from Colorado where I was listening to many people say very complimentary things about you.
Really? Oh, man. Yeah. I got a lot of liars on my team, you know. That's nice, though. Thank you. Thank you. I heard a lot of people say a lot of complimentary things about you, too, and how good you are at directing me. So I have some more ideas for us, Paul.
I know you want to be Catherine, too.
Yes, I want to be Catherine. I love that movie.
Well, Mark, what was the question?
Well, let me start with a question for you, Paul, which is just that you've talked about how you have this kind of self-invented genre of the man in a room, and I'm wondering what it is that kind of draws you back to this image and this idea.
Well, first of all, it's not really a film genre. It comes from literature. It comes from 20th century literature. It's the tradition of Dostoevsky, Notes from the Underground, Sartre, Nausea, Camus, Stranger, which are these sort of existential novels of a single male narrator. When I felt the need to write Taxi Driver as a form of self-therapy, I turned to that tradition. And it's a tradition that I've come back to a number of times, and one that has served me well, and I think I'm pretty good at it.
The best.
I know. Tiffany, tell me what your sort of first impressions were when you first got the script, and had you been looking to do something different?
I'm always looking to do something different. I like to challenge my creative muscles, you know, and create new things. But the thing, when I first got the script, I read it the first time, I was like, wait a minute, I'm confused. What is going, I don't get it. And then I read it again, and then my comprehension kicked in, and I was like, I know people like this. I'm always trying to figure them out. What's the deal? Like, I totally wanted to be ingratiated in that world. And it's Paul Schrader. Come on.
And then, Paul, tell me a little bit about the world of the movie, especially these kind of low stakes casinos. Like, it is not the sort of gambling and casino world that we usually see in movies. What appealed to you about depicting this kind of particularly sort of like down at the heels, you know, casino?
Well, you know, it comes down to an occupational metaphor. You know, some occupation that you think you know, but you really don't, whether it be a taxi driver, a gigolo, a drug delivery boy, a minister, and then you find a new way to use that occupation as a metaphor for something else. And in my case, the idea of these people who play cards all day, every day, it seemed to be a very odd kind of career choice. And I likened them more to people who sit in front of a slot machine than to athletes. And I said, you know, what kind of person does that? What kind of person just sits down and runs numbers for all day, every day? Because that's essentially what you're doing when you're counting cards or playing poker. You're running the odds. And so I had an occupation which people thought they do, but which I thought had some power and muscle underneath the surface. And then I just needed a personal or societal problem that would line up with that occupation. And when you do this, on one hand, you have the metaphor of the occupation. The other hand, you have the problem. In this case, it's inability to forgive oneself. And you start taking these two elements and you bring them closer and further apart. And at some point, if you're onto something, the sparks start to fly between the two. If they touch, there are no sparks. If they're too far apart, there's no sparks. But right around here, you're saying, "Oh, this is a good idea. I can feel the sparks coming," and that's the same thing that happens to a reader or a listener or a viewer. They start sparking, and that's what art does best: is to spark your imagination rather than tell you what to think.
And Paul, on the one hand, you have this world of gamblers and casinos. On the other hand, you have this world in which William Tell had been a guard at Abu Ghraib prison. How do you come to combine those two worlds in the story?
He was one of the bad guys, and he was good at it. The most terrifying line in the film is when he acknowledges that he was right. I had what it takes, and any person who doesn't understand that is deluding themselves. We all have what it takes to go to the dark side. All we need is the right circumstances, the right training, the right incentive, and we'll go. And that's where he became a common man. People say, how can you make a torturer a hero? Well, we're not that far away from him, and that's one of the things that art is kind of good at.
I know there's a few men in my life that I've tortured.
Well,
Tell me a little bit about Melinda. Was this a character that felt familiar to you at all?
There's aspects of Melinda that felt familiar to me, and there's aspects that was really different for me to play. I'm the type of person that's always trying to, I want a good laugh. I deal with a lot of difficulties in life, and I'm always trying to find a laugh. Melinda's not necessarily always trying to find a laugh. She's looking for the money and the opportunity, right? And she's a hustler. So she's a little more serious than I am, and she brings a lot of charisma. But she's more serious than I am when it comes to certain.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm just thinking about this right now. In the past, in another time frame, this would have been played by a young white male, and it has been. But it's so much more interesting this way. You can imagine. Well, you can imagine this film, with a typical 50s, 60s male supporting character, and it would not be as interesting. And so when
I know the love scene wouldn't be that hot.
That's true. Oh well, no, don't underestimate. We can break that down in two different ways.
Yeah.
So that was interesting to me that in casting someone whose background is not in conventional narrative, but in the hot wire occupation of stand-up. And I've worked with a number of comedians in the past, and it's always very exhilarating to tap into their energy.
And Tiffany, you've been very open about the fact that this, at first at least, was difficult for you. That you sort of struggled in rehearsals and at first to find the character. And tell me a little bit about that. What was it that maybe you felt like you weren't getting or weren't understanding? And what did Paul and Oscar maybe do to sort of, help you in your performance?
Well, the amazing thing about Paul is he knows how to reel me in, and he's very honest and blatant, and that's what I need. Like, a great director knows how to tell you what to bring to the table, right? And on that first day, the first 2 days of rehearsal, I had in my mind like what I was gonna make Lalinda and how I was gonna give her like, I made her funny, and I was definitely what we call gilding the lily. I was doing too much, right? And in drama, you don't need to do all of that. I'm so used to doing comedies, and comedy is hard because you got to know, like you're tickling people's souls, right? You're bringing them in on your journey, and you're tickling their souls to get them to laugh. Well, in drama, I don't have to tickle your soul. I just got to be here, right? And I'm so programmed to do the hard work. The easy work was a little confusing for me. But then, my guy Paul, he really.
Well, Tiffany brought up in other interviews. She brought up this notion of singing, of rhythm, and
Yeah.
there is a kind of rhythm to comedy. In fact, you can hear it. If I said to you, Marshmallow comedy, you could close your eyes and hear the beats because Marshmallow comedy had a certain beat to it, and so this kind of narrative has a different rhythm, and so Tiffany said in an interview that I had told her that she was singing the role and she shouldn't sing it, and then she objected, but then realized, in fact, that was what, in fact, she was doing.
Yep. Exactly. He's like, you're singing. I'm like, no, I'm not. He's like, yes, you are. You sing when you talk. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, I am singing. He was right. Yeah.
Because Paul, it's funny. As much as people talk about you as this sort of writer of, these broken, wounded men, it strikes me that you actually, in all these stories you've told through the years, have written a lot of really terrific parts for women. I'm thinking of like Sybil Shepherd in Taxi Driver, Lauren Hutton in American Gigolo, and I think especially for this film, Susan Sarandon.
I've only made 2 films with the female protagonist. One was Patty Hearst, and the other was Cat People. And people have asked me whether I could do this character as a female. And I sort of tried once years ago with a movie called Old Boyfriends, which was a revenge movie. And I set it up to be directed by Joan Tewksbury. And I realized I was wrong. My instincts for this kind of character, and you can't underestimate your instincts, is too male. And I know what this guy does, even when he's stupid, and even when he's self-contradictory, and even when he's lying to himself. But I don't know the same if he were a female. And without that kind of intuitive consciousness, it's hard to write a character. No, it's not just sexual. I mean, there are men who know these women better than they know other men almost. So it's just individual, individual talents, skills.
But you do seem adept at writing these women in the world of these men. I mean, and I was going to ask you if you feel like, to some extent, you have to understand women or be able to write these female characters to be able to properly explore the world of men. Like, how does Lalinda sort of fit into this world of men?
This is something I'm discussing with myself right now, because usually you have the male vocalist, the narrator, and then you have a female counterpoint. The one I'm going to do next, I have 2 females, and they're quite different. And this is forcing me to rethink some things. So whenever you start a new project, you start with the old wine, but you're always looking for the new bottle.
Because Tiffany, I find you and Oscar in the film, you have such a great chemistry. There's something so exciting about the 2 of you together on screen. And it's funny, some of the best scenes in the movie are just the 2 of you like sitting at a bar talking to each other. In some ways they seem so simple, but they're so exciting. did you feel like you and Oscar had kind of an immediate chemistry, or for you, what is exciting in some of those scenes together?
Well, I think that, well, first of all, Oscar was so like giving and open and communicated with me outside of the scenes that it was super easy to go into the scene and like we were just continuing our conversation that we might have been having about like South Central Los Angeles or the difference between Florida and California. And then we're in our scene talking about gambling, right? And it was that same kind of energy and dynamic. We genuinely enjoy communicating with each other, right? And I think it's really important as an actor to cultivate that type of relationship with anyone that you're working with. When we did Girls Trip, I didn't know them women at all, but our chemistry was on point because I made sure I got to know them as a person. So then when we're doing our scenes together, I feel a certain level of comfort with them and they feel a certain level of comfort with me. Even when Oscar and I were just like in the first scene where we first meet and we not supposed to know each other, but I've been watching him, that's kind of real because I have been watching him for years. I've been watching what he does. And I always imagine, when we were shooting it, I was imagining if this was my first time ever approaching Oscar and I want him to do something.
But also you have that delightful line that throws him off, which seems to come out of nowhere, which is, "Have you ever been inside?" And you can see he's thrown because we know already as a viewer that he has been inside, but she has no knowledge of that, and so it's a wonderful kind of vocal tool. It's like an interrogator using something to throw a person off, and that's what catches you. I think in that conversation is she gets topspin on the ball, and now he's trying to catch up.
Yeah.
Because Paul, when you see that two performers have chemistry the way that Tiffany and Oscar did, what as a director do you do to like bring that out? Like, how do you sort of highlight what you see happening in front of you?
Well, I mean, it's just at that point, is it a director or is it a writer? As a writer, you're trying to sharpen the dialogue, and you're realizing that you're probably going to edit something eventually out of the speech. Why don't you just edit it right now and let them make it better, rather than edit it, 4 months from now? And so you're hearing the dialogue, but you're also trying to think what little things you can fix or you can recommend, and that's just a writer's job. A director's job is, trying to catch that sparkle, where the lighting and the lenses, and but if actors haven't, and Tiffany and Oscar haven't, it's easier to catch than not catch.
Because this is kind of an unusual situation with the card counter, in that the production of the film was shut down due to the pandemic, and then you came back. But in the break, Paul, you were able to sort of rewrite some scenes, and in some ways, I'm wondering if you feel like the break really benefited the movie.
Well, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I do know that in most films, if you have a sufficient budget, you can go back and reshoot. In indie films, you can't. You have a certain amount of money, you spend it, you're done. Make the best of it. But in this case, I had a kind of forced reshoot concept where I could edit the film together as it was with unshot scenes, which would be then inserted where it was said scene to be shot, and the actors would read their dialogue off camera. And then I could show that as a finished film and then say to friends, I have these scenes yet to shoot. Am I missing something? And normally, friends will not tell you what you're missing because they don't want to hurt your feelings because they know you can't go back and fix it. So if I tell you you've got this thing is absolutely terrible, and I know you need it for the plot, I'm not going to tell that to you because it just make you feel terrible. Um, and so, but in this case, people could actually be honest with me and say, I think that should be better. And as soon as you start hearing that, activate your own process, and you start thinking, oh, well, how can I make that better? So that was. I hate to say there are any upsides to COVID hiatus, but if there was, that was it.
And Tiffany, was that a challenge for you to have sort of left the production and then come back? Was it hard to sort of return to Linda and the world of the movie?
No, I was really happy. The only hard part is I had braided my hair. And they were like, it's going to take about 3 hours to take the braids out. And I was like, that's it. We're cutting it off. I've been wanting to see my scalp. And I'm wearing a wig anyways. The wig's going to fit better. It'll look better. And that was, I think, the hardest part. I was so happy to be back. I was so happy to, be back with Paul and with Oscar. And we had, a few rehearsals before we jumped right back into shooting, which was a great refresher. And yeah, I was happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look up the word multitasker, you'll see a picture of Tiffany. I mean, this woman has so many things going on. There was an article about her in the New York Times Magazine about all her projects. And I said to her, Tiffany, after I read that article, I had to sit down and take a rest because she was doing so many things.
Yeah. Well, I try to stay out of trouble, Paul. I'm the type of person, if I don't have constructive things to do, I get destructive, right? And like I said, I have tortured some men in my time. So that's why I try to stay busy. So I'm not driving some man crazy. Okay.
But Tiffany, especially now.
I'm just thinking about that movie. I think I could write that movie.
But we could, Paul, I can help you come up with this, a dark female character who's trying to hide behind the jokes.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting. But the thing would be, you first think of it from the male point of view, and then flip it around and see where you are.
Right. And throw hormones in there and sugar cravings and sexual feelings that you have to keep in control because you don't want to be labeled a slut. Things like that.
Because Tiffany, you are so busy now.
I thought you were about to say that I was a slut. I was going to cuss you out, Mark.
No. But the thing is that you're not, like, what you're doing, you've got you're making movies, you're doing stand-up, you've written a book, you've got television show. Like, these are all things that seem really different. Do you like...
She's also in real estate.
Yeah, I got a lot of real estate, too.
Wow.
And I'm a farmer.
What do you like the fact that those things are all different? Do they satisfy different things for you, or are they kind of coming from the same creative place?
Well, I think they all come from the same creative place, but different creative energy, right? Like when it comes to the books, that's like all the words that I want to get out, but I can't get them all out at one time because then people would be like, you talk too much, and nobody would remember. So document it in a book, right? Then when it comes to like the comedy, that's my way of bringing joy to the world. I think it's already so hard and difficult to be a human. It's like, where is the outlet to laugh and to feel relief from just the normal pains of being a person, right? And then when it comes to the real estate, it's like, oh, I want to be a queen, and queens have land, and I need all the land. And then I'm a farmer. It's something about growing food that makes me feel like a magician, like I can do magic. When you take this little seed, and it's the same thing with thoughts and ideas too. You take the little seed, you plant it in the ground, you water it, you give it nutrients, and then it turns around and feeds you. And that's the same thing with my jokes. I have a thought, I write it down, I work it, I feed it, I share it, and then it turns around and it feeds me, it pays me, right? And the same thing, Paul does it all the time with his movies. You know, you have a thought, an idea, you write it, you nurture it, and bam, it's so. In every way, I create, even when I start messing with my family. That's another thing.
I know, Paul, this conversation is one that's going to be seen by people who've just seen the movie. So I want to ask you a question sort of specifically about the ending of the movie. You don't have to be concerned about spoilers. You know, the movie ends with an image of Tiffany and Oscar on either side of a glass partition at a jail. And it's an image you've returned to a number of times. I think it's rooted in Robert Bresson's Pickpocket. And I'm curious what it is that really speaks to you about that image and why it's something you keep returning to.
It has this idea of returning to your cage. Uh, my background, John Calvin referred to the human body as the prison house of the soul. And this whole notion that your body is a prison and you need to escape it. Now, I don't believe that, but that's how I was raised. So it's not unusual for people to escape one prison only in search of a new one, because they're never going to be home till they're back in prison. So you leave the Midwest and you go to Japan and you enter a Japanese prison and you say, I'm free. But no, you just own a different prison. And that's why you're home. And so often in these characters, and as the Robert Bean, the songwriter, sings at the end, just trying to find my way back home. In his case, prison is a metaphor for home. And that's something I do quite often, is use a thing how you don't expect it to. These are not typical poker players, and most people don't think of prison as home. So if you do things like that, it makes people stretch their imagination.
And Tiffany, what did you make of that last scene? For you, what kind of draws Lalinda back to William? Why does she go visit him at the prison, and you get the sense that she's going to stick by him?
Well, I feel like Lalinda has known men like Will Attell her whole life, and she found something in him that's different than the others. That's worth it. And I think that she loved that he cared so much about that kid, that he was willing to sacrifice. And there's a connection there. That's probably always going to be there. She might move on to some other guy, but she's always going to check on him.
We talked about this at the time, and I said it's not a love scene in the sense that they're going to go off together. And she probably certainly does have another life, and probably perhaps even has a husband. But this is something that means something to her, and she makes these visits. And he looks forward to them, and I think that's all the hope you need.
Right.
And then, Paul, I have to ask, what for you keeps drawing you back to such dark stories? I mean, you, all through your career, you've really examined a sort of side of life that many people turn away from. And what is it for you that keeps drawing you to sort of these kind of stories?
Well, I mean, contradiction is the heart and essence of character. So, I loved her so much I hit her. That's character. And so much I hit her again, that's even more character. And so you're always looking for people who act and think in contradiction, because then you're creating character. And so you're often driven to the darker side because people try to portray themselves as one thing when in fact they're something else, and vice versa. So I don't see it as dark characters. I just see them as typically complex and contradictory as we all are.
And then, Tiffany, before we wrap up, I've heard you talk a number of times about how much you love Paul's movie Cat People, but I've never heard you really talk about it in specific, and especially since we have Paul here, I'd love to hear what it is that you like so much about Cat People and why that was a movie that really made you excited to work with Paul.
Well, you have to remember when Cat People came out, I was really young, right? And it was my first time seeing a white woman look so beautiful. And then she turned into a black cat, which I don't know why, but I felt like she was turning into a black woman. In my mind, it was like, oh, I want to be that black cat. I am that black cat. And people are afraid and they run away from her. And it's like she's trying to control this thing and it's really hard to control. And I feel like that in my life, like I'm trying to control certain things and it's difficult to control nature, right? And it's kind of deep for me. It's kind of deep for me. It's things that I saw in it that I really apply to my existence. So,
but if we did it, Tiffany, I'd have to turn you into an albino tiger.
A white tiger.
Yeah, an albino.
Yeah. Turn me into a cheetah, a leopard. But because I do have so many spots, but it's just something about, I don't know what it was. My little mind, she was so beautiful, so gorgeous. And then she turned into a black cat. Wow.
I can't even tell you how excited I am. I really hope that the two of you write this new script. I love the idea that you do another project together.
I would love to. I would love to.
I don't know how much. I don't know how much mileage is left on the meter.
Oh, you got some mileage left on you, player. You got at least 1,000 more miles. We can go. We can do 50. Come on. We got this.
Well, Tiffany, Paul, thank you to the both of you for joining us today. And for the Los Angeles Times, I'm Mark Olsen.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I'm going to ring off.
Bye.